Initial system attempts unsuccessful. Hi, my name is Tom Rolley for Graduate Medicine. Just reporting in on my initial attempts to take a lot of the systems insight that I've had in business and apply them to medicine. Now, admittedly, this was probably a big attempt to go for the COPDX guidelines. Now, if you haven't been in these lately, it's about 85 pages of relatively dense medical information covering the 5 major steps of managing COPD. And as I began to digest what was going on and think about, okay, if I'm going to take a patient through these steps in a systematic way, what does that look like? And the immediate insight that hit me was that exacerbations, the X of COPD, is going to be its own system. Like, most of the time, they don't have exacerbations, and therefore there's no point in having a system for that that's incorporated into their overall management. But when they do have an exacerbation, great, now we can bust out that system. But to look at the density of the document, to look at the content of the document, the number of ideas that are in the document, it's overwhelming just to even look at it. I'm like, how is anybody outside of a respiratory physician who is dealing largely with COPD across all of this? Because if you're in general practice and you're dealing with maybe 2 or 3, maybe 5 COPD patients a day, but you have a grand total of 15 minutes to get through their story, their situation, and then look at what are you going to do. This is a very daunting experience to have. And so what do people do? Well, I suppose you try and bust out the guidelines and get to the information that you need and hope that there's no gimmies. There's no, sorry, not gimmies, gotchas. No gotchas where it's like, oh, didn't you know? We wrote that, but you also needed to know about this other section in chapter 3 that was referenced, but in your 2 minutes, maybe 90 seconds, maybe 30 seconds that you had, you didn't actually see that. Let alone just leaving the patient kind of looking at you look up the information. This is a difficult situation. But the original idea of this post was to look at the idea of systemization and taking these guidelines and making them usable, making them deployable. And it's a daunting task. And this is only one chronic disease. I'm like, oh my goodness, how's this going to work? Well, the next thought that I've got outside of splitting off exacerbations and testing whether that could be systemized is then looking at the other 4 steps. Is this actually a system of systems? Is COPDX guidelines actually 5 separate systems that are implemented either in sequence or in parallel? And that's where I'm heading with this. I'm kind of curious to see how it evolves. Now, this also assumes that I know what I'm doing with systems, and fortunately, I do. Fortunately, I have tested a structure that I call the magic board, and it's different from Kanban. If you're not sure what Kanban arose from Toyota's assembly line process where they're making cars, and they use this system of of not done, doing, and done to track, and it's very effective as long as not much changes. Now, if you've been in medicine or at least in general practice for the last 3 years, you know how often things change. They change all the time. Even today, I found out that all of my bulk billing bonuses for being in a rural area all got rejected. Why? Because they changed the 10991, got rid of that. Well, they still kept that. Admittedly, they did keep that, but that's only if you're in Monash 2. Modified Monash, whatever the last model 2, it used to be 2 to 7, but now they've created another 4 different ones which have 0 reference to 10991. It would have been kind of useful if it was 10992, 10993, but the number is like 75855. Completely different. You're like, oh, okay. It's almost like it was designed not to be used. Anyway, so I got all these rejections. I'm like, what's going on? So this is another test. But coming back to this idea, trying to turn guidelines into systems is challenging because the guidelines were never built as systems. There was no systems mindset that went into them. There was just like, well, let's dump a huge amount of information into an 85-page document and hope that someone somewhere has enough time in a consult to actually read some of it and that it's accurate. This is not that useful. It's really not that useful when you are under pressure, when you are seeing multiple patients, when you're 25 minutes late already, and the patient comes in with COPD exacerbation. You need to know what to do fast. You need to be accurate. You need to have all of the steps documented. This is not just from a patient getting better, but also from a medico-legal. So this is a big task. But I'm curious to see whether the COPD guidelines can be adapted to systems. Right now, it's a total failure. Way too much information for one system, but over the coming weeks, I'm going to play with this and see whether it's possible to, as a patient comes in with a suspicion of COPD, can the system be executed to make that diagnosis? If they've already got the management and they're stable, can the system be executed to ensure that their medications are optimized? If they come in with an exacerbation, can a different system be executed to manage that? And suddenly I'm confident in what I need to do. I'm confident in what the patient needs to do. I'm confident about where I'm up to in the management of this patient. And medicine becomes a whole lot safer, a whole lot less risky, and also a whole lot more fun. So we'll see how this plays out. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you got some value out of it. And trying to look at systems in medicine, it's not a strong point. It's definitely not a strong point of our game, but it may well be something that we must look at due to the crisis in general practice. All right, look forward to seeing another episode. See you soon.